A common question that veterans ask when filing a VA claim is, should I pay for a Nexus letter? Because if you've looked into this at all, you've probably seen doctors online offering Nexus letters for hundreds or even thousands of dollars, and that can make a lot of veterans wonder if they're about to get ripped off or if it's something they actually need. The truth is, Nexus letters can be very helpful evidence in some VA claims. But before you pull out your credit card, there are a few things you should know first. In this video, I'm going to help you think through that question by talking about whether you should try getting a Nexus letter from your own doctor first, why some doctors are willing to write them and why some won't, and where veterans sometimes look online if they decide they want to pursue one that way. If you're trying to build a stronger claim and want clear explanations from my experience about how this process actually works, make sure to subscribe to the channel and give this video a thumbs up so more veterans can find this information. All right, so let's get into the question. Should you actually pay for a Nexus letter? Now, before we do any of that, what is a Nexus? Because not every single claim is going to require a Nexus letter, but every single claim will require a Nexus. A Nexus is essentially a connection between a current diagnosed condition and something that happened to you while you were in service. Now, the thing that happened to you while you were in service, I oftentimes like to call it, your anchor. Something that you can point to and say that because of this activity or because of this event or because, of this illness, that I was diagnosed with, or because of this exposure to noise or to burn pits, whatever it is, I'm dealing with the condition that I currently have now. And of course, trying to, draw that conclusion to that anchor is going to require some sort of information or some sort of fact, which essentially is a nexus. And that nexus is necessary for the VA to approve your claim. Now, that may sound confusing. It may sound very hard to reach, but I'm here to say that it's not. I won't say that everything's provable, but, if you have an anchor and it makes sense and, you can prove with medical evidence that, that the two of them are connected, then the VA will oftentimes approve your claim. And so I like to encourage veterans that if they think that there's something, if they know there's something wrong with them and they think that it's connected to service, they should most definitely, put in a claim and get the compensation or the rating that they deserve. So once you understand that that a nexus is required, now it's time to figure out how do you get that nexus. And honestly, there's a lot of easy and free ways to get a nexus. But veterans do ask the question all the time, do I need a nexus letter? Well, let's talk about what a nexus letter is. So a nexus letter, before I say that, you don't need a nexus letter. You need a nexus statement. A statement could be something that, you need that evidence, right? It could be something that's in a personal statement combined with something, that you provide the VA to prove that nexus. And that can come in the form of just a lot of different types of evidence. And I have videos out there on that. There's a lot of information out there on the internet about that. But essentially that is that. And I would say that most claims don't require a nexus letter. Most claims you can probably get a lot of it done for free, but just, your time and energy of doing the research to put it together. But if you're at the point where you're like, I need to know what a nexus letter is. I need a nexus letter. I think I need a nexus letter. What is a nexus letter? A nexus letter is probably, is known most commonly as a nexus letter, but I think that an independent medical opinion is probably a better term for it because, it's a medical opinion from a doctor that's going to write it down on a piece of paper and on a letter, that has their name stamped on it. It's got all their information to prove that they are a medical professional. And the nexus letter essentially draws the conclusion from, your anchor, the thing that happened to you in service, to the condition today. And they explain in scientific, terms and that, this is connected and they articulate that. And so that's essentially a nexus letter or an independent medical opinion. Now, I do want to throw a caveat out there really fast. Because I've seen people ask, "Hey, I'm trying to get an increase for a condition that I have. Do I need a nexus letter?" And this might be trivial, but no, like a Nexus letter won't help you with an increase because the VA already has a Nexus assigned. They already agree with you that there's a Nexus. So in that case, it would be an independent medical opinion that would take the place of that Nexus letter. However, you don't always need an independent medical opinion, or at least you don't need to pay for an independent medical opinion to get an increase. You can do an increase by, simply showing proof that your condition's gotten worse. You can do that by going to the doctor. You can do that by writing a personal statement. Those are ways to do it. But, if you have a hard time with that or you need to appeal, there are independent medical opinions and doctors out there that will write them for you, and they'll charge you for it. But, they could work. So I just wanted to throw that out there just so that I can clear up any confusion about the two different types. All right, so I'm going to now talk about what the CFR says about who's qualified to, to provide you with a Nexus. And according to CFR 3.159, a person is qualified through education, training, or experience to offer medical diagnoses, statements, or opinions. The question that comes up is, can a nurse practitioner write a Nexus letter? Can a physician assistant write a Nexus letter? If you read this, yes, it looks like they can. They're qualified through education, training, or experience to, diagnose a condition and make statements or opinions. So I think any medical professional is in a position to do that. In fact, if you go to a CMP exam, you're going to have, a PA or an MP there doing that. So I think that those are valuable pieces of evidence. Does a doctor carry more weight? Probably. But this is just information to help you decide where you're going to go with this. It also states medical journals, records, and articles, and then, of course, independent medical opinions or Nexus letters, etc. Those are also helpful. Those are free, right? Like you can find medical journals and records online and articles about things. I will tell you that I don't think I've had very much luck providing journals and things to win my claim. If you have, please throw that in the comment section below. I think it would be a valuable piece of information for folks listening to this video to hear about. If you've had no luck in doing that, or you've had the same luck that I've had, also include that as well. I think that I'd like to know a little bit more about that. So if you've put a medical journal in your claim, or an article, has it helped you? So now, I want to talk about the benefits of getting a Nexus letter from your own doctor, because typically your doctor's probably not going to charge you, and if you're being seen for and treated for the condition that you're trying to get connected, your doctor's going to know a lot more about you from all of your treatments or your visits, and they can help you understand your condition, and like if you're talking to them and you're telling them what you're trying to do, and trying to understand whether or not this is connected to your condition, they might be able to help you, figure out whether or not it is. And then, of course, if they were to write a letter for you, they are in a position to, already understand your condition. They have likely already viewed your medical history, or at least the medical history with them. And so I in my opinion, that's going to be a very credible, way to do this. So there's a lot of benefits from just talking to your doctor about your condition and trying to understand whether or not your condition can or cannot be connected to service. When we look at the 38 CFR for some of these conditions, the language that they use, sometimes it's hard to determine whether or not, where you are, in the rating criteria. And so your own personal doctor who understands your condition may be a really good resource and can be very beneficial if you're trying to get a Nexus letter. If you can do it from your doctor, that's going to be completely beneficial for you. Now, you probably agree with me. You probably say, yeah, like getting a Nexus letter from my own doctor free would be great. But how do I do it? Like, how does it work? I'm going to tell you, like, that's a tough question. And I've asked my doctor to write me one in the past. and I was successful, and it worked. So how do you do it? How did I do it? Number one, and it is daunting, and I do agree, it's daunting, and I know that it can be very difficult to broach that subject with your doctor, but they're there treating you. They want to help you. They may say no, but it doesn't hurt to just ask them for their opinion on whether or not they think it's connected. And you can explain to them that, hey, listen, I'm trying to get my VA stuff squared away, and I've been coming to you for a year or two now on this condition, and in order for me to for the VA to recognize this as something that's connected to my service, is I need to get an opinion from a medical professional, like my doctor. And you can explain to them that, your theory on why you think it's connected. You can explain to them that you think it's connected because of, maybe an accident that you were involved in while you were in the military. Maybe it was, an exposure to something. Let's take hearing. You're dealing with hearing problems now. You were exposed to loud noises while you were in the military. Your doctor can help you figure out why or why not, right? They may say, listen, it's not like, your hearing is bad because, you got into a second job after the military that had really loud noise exposure. So, in my opinion, it's not. And that's bad news, but at least you know what their opinion is. But they might say, hey, absolutely. Like, there's a lot of studies out there that say that, military members are exposed to loud noises. What kind of loud noises were exposed to? And this would be a conversation between you and your doctor. And your doctor, may be able to feel comfortable with that and making those statements for you, or at least helping you understand why. And then, if your doctor's not willing to, then you could always move on to the next step of paying for a Nexus letter from somebody, but at least that your doctor agrees that it could be. Another thing you could do if your doctor isn't willing to is you could have your doctor write a statement inside your medical records on their opinion. It doesn't have to be on a letter format. It can simply be in your records. But if they do decide to do this for you, a nice letter, or even in your notes, they need to make sure that they understand what you're asking them to do. They need to, be able to, you're basically trying to prove service connection. So they need to be able to, show like that, this condition was caused by whatever it was, and back it up with facts on why they think. You also want to explain to them the standard of proof, that you need to be able to explain to them that they need to be able to kind of like give some sort of like, degree of certainty, right? And the way I explained it to my doctor was that they like to see it quantified. In fact, the VA likes to see the language of at least as likely as not, or more than likely as not. Those are, that gets them to that 50%, to that tiebreaker, or to the above with more than likely than not. And so, and that also may be helpful when you're talking to your doctor, that, they're really just providing facts and an opinion, right? Like, this is an opinion. It's not like they're, being asked to judge something. Like, it's just essentially their opinion on what they think. You also might want to go a step above, and this is a problem that I forgot to do on one of my conditions, was to talk about the severity with my doctor, because if your goal is to try and get something service connected because you believe it should be, but you don't, but you forget to try to make sure that you're documenting everything that is wrong with you in terms of like the criteria that, that's in 38 CFR for whatever your condition is, you may get underrated. Okay. And that's frustrating. You can always fix it later, but it does take time. I think something truly valuable about having this conversation with your doctor is I would show them the criteria in 38 CFR for that condition. If you don't know that already, you should Google 38 CFR plus your condition and look at the different rating criteria, right? The VA rates each condition on a percentage basis. So, you might be at 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever it is. Show them the criteria and just say, hey, like, me better, my condition, or at least, scientifically, my condition better than I do. Where do you think I fall? And then ask, like, why do you think that? And they might be able to include that in your medical records so that it will help the VA rater give you the right rating, right? You want the right rating, and that's a good way to do that. So I ask that if you go this route, talk to your doctor about the different rating criteria so you can make sure that you're in the right one. What if you do get your doctor to do this, your doctor feels comfortable, what makes a letter strong? Make sure they put their status on there, right? Are they a doctor? Are they a PA? Are they MP? Are they qualified to make the connection? If you can answer yes to that and they have all that information, that's good. It's helpful to say that they reviewed your medical records to include your service treatment records, right? That's what those, letters that you pay for are going to have. So you want, your private doctor to have that as well. You want them to mention, how military service is connected, and you want to make sure that it's well connected and based on medical reasoning. And your doctor should know that. You shouldn't have to tell your doctor that, but just something good for you to know. And then, of course, like I mentioned earlier in the last slide, use the VA's language of at least as likely as not, more likely than not, or if it's not, connected, then they don't need to write anything, but it would be less than likely. And then, of course, make sure that if they can, and I know we're asking for a lot from our doctors by doing this, but, if they'd be willing to discuss the symptoms to ensure you get the right rating, that would make this much stronger. Now, we might not always be able to get a doctor or our own doctor to do it for free. We may not even, get treated for the condition that we're trying to claim. And so I am a realistic person, and I do realize that it may be difficult to get a doctor to spend the time to do that. And it may even be even more difficult to talk to a doctor about it. So what I have seen is if you call around a local specialist to see if they'll help you out, to at least look at your condition and evaluate your records and help you out with a Nexus letter, you might have some luck with that. I have not personally. I don't think I've had any luck with that. No, I don't think I have. And but I have talked to people who have tried this, and they do get the runaround on it. So it's going to be hit or miss, but it might work for you. You might get a doctor that's willing to do it. I'd like to think that there are doctors that are willing to, but obviously they're going to probably charge you a visit fee. It could be with your insurance, right? And so that would be, just something to think about. And I'm sure that's probably what their front office is wondering as well. Like, what are you coming in for? But that is a possibility. Another thing that I know is possible is you can ask your VSO. They might know of local doctors that will help out. I've actually heard of this from other vets that their VSO is like, hey, like this doctor over on this street will help, you should call them. They'll help you out. And then lastly, is, you can go on Google and you can do that. I've done a lot of research on Facebook, and, there's a lot of, medical professionals out there that advertise this. And I know it can be hard, like unless you're really looking, because once you start looking, you'll get the feed into the algorithm. But there's also some good medical professionals on YouTube that have really good videos, and I think that's a good opportunity to watch some of those videos and see what that doctor's all about, and then reaching out to them, and at least you'll have that, kind of that already like, connection, or at least trust. If you trust, what they're saying. They are going to charge you, and it's okay. Like if you've gotten to the point where you need a Nexus letter, you've been denied. And by the way, this is only my advice, my opinion. I probably wouldn't pay for a Nexus letter unless I've tried everything else and I'm on appeal and I still feel strongly that it should be connected. At that point, then I might consider paying for a Nexus letter. But, I'm out, right out of the gate, I'm probably not going to pay for a Nexus letter unless it's like a secondary condition, and I know it's going to be really complicated to connect one to another. Then I may, consider a Nexus letter, prior to getting the denial. But I most certainly would just suggest talking to an accredited agent or a VSO, someone that's been in the process for a while, so that you can get a good a good second opinion on that before you throw and cash out a bunch of money.